On Saturday, September 19, 2015, the CCB chapter, Fresno, California, hosted their second annual Dining in the Dark event. William Elliott shares his story.
When I was first asked to do a short talk, I was asked to tell a story about my road to blindness. So my first question to myself was, where would I start on my story? And here is a can of beans. A very simple can of beans, just 12 ounces, and it's with that item that I started on my road to blindness. No one threw a can of beans at me. I was actually working in a supermarket as a personal shopper, and one day in October 2001, just after 9/11, I was given my list of groceries to pick on the computer, and one item was a can of beans. So I bent down to the lower shelf and I could see. I stood up, can of beans in my hand, and my world was like looking through a broken windshield. Several weeks later, I completely ignored this event. I went to the doctors with a cold and just happened to mention that I had problems with my eyesight. He looked in my eyes, told me to go to the other side of the room and said, read the eye chart on the wall. My answer, where's the wall? So his instructions to me were, get straight down. I'm from England, as you may have guessed, but straight down to the eye hospital in Liverpool. Don't ask any questions, get in there, see a doctor straight away, which I did. And after several weeks of tests, several more visits to the eye hospital, they decided that I had a blood clotting disorder. The very event of me bending down to pick up the can of beans was enough to increase my blood pressure and force a blood clot into the back of my right eye. And that totally destroyed the retina and my central vision in that eye. I was luckily, though, still able to see from my left eye. And they even cheered me up with more good news. This is not going to be an event that only happens once. It is a question of when it will happen again. So with that thought in mind, I went off and created a bucket list. And the top of my bucket list was that I would go on a nice train trip. I'd always loved travelling by train across Britain, across Europe, but I'd never been on a really big train trip. So this one was going to be, come to the United States and spend 6 weeks travelling from LA, through Seattle, Chicago, New York, my favourite place, Gettysburg, and then down to Florida and back to LA. And then I would just enjoy the rest of my life. Go back home to England and stay there. But on the way, I also decided that I should ask several people. The internet was new, so I created a page on a pen friend site and said, anyone out there want to give me some tips about, if you live in the United States, where I should definitely go to visit? And several people wrote back to me and said, you need to come see this place, that place. And one of them was Darcy, who is here with me today. as you can guess, that trip was one of the events that changed my life. I travelled around the United States and kept in touch with Darcy. She was, in return, going to visit England the next year with one of her friends. And so I said, well, I'll reciprocate. I will show you some places in England. And so that happened. And in 2004, Darcy agreed to marry me. So as we moved, she moved with me back to England until 2006, when we decided that it would be nice to move to California, and I would go back to school, earn a degree and look for a good job, and Darcy would help me through those times. So we came back to the United States and bought a house in Kalinga, where Darcy was a science teacher at that time. But the little gremlin was sat there waiting, and as I painted our bathroom one day, again, the windshield. This time it was my left eye. And we were rushed to various doctors, and they proceeded with treatments. To the time was injecting steroids, which had their own side effects, and then moved on to other drugs, which had less side effects, but also they started to prove less effective. So I eventually lost the sight of my eye, my left eye, in 2011. And being in Kalinga, it was very isolated, and trips to the doctors were very difficult. At the time, I was probably visiting Fresno at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And at that point, my in-laws, Darcy's parents, Dot and Dave, who sat over to my left, stepped in, and they would regularly come to Fresno, meet me at the airport where the bus dropped me off, drive me to my doctor's appointments, and quite often would drive me all the way back to Kalinga. And that carried on for a few years. And all the time I felt totally isolated. As far as I knew, I was the only blind person in Kalinga. I had a white cane. I would go back and to work. I kept my job at the time. And eventually I decided I would try for a guide dog. And that experience meant, for the first time in my life, I actually met other blind people. I'd never even known that there was a blind community. I knew blind people existed. I'd given to Guide Dogs for the Blind in England. I'd heard of Guide Dogs for the Blind here in the United States and several other organisations. But I'd never actually met a blind person. So in 2013, I set off to San Rafael in the Bay Area, where I met up with a nice black Labrador. He's a male black Labrador, and he's here now, Leif. And we graduated from San Rafael on the 2nd of November 2013. But even then, I still knew something was not right. Something was missing. I'd met blind people there, but I was not meeting blind people at home. And at that point, we started to look for organisations, and we found CCB. And Nathan, our president, was very gracious to invite me to one of our meetings, and Darcy and I became members in August of 2014. And we very much appreciate all of the things that CCB have done. It's amazing actually how much you think that when you visit somewhere and something goes wrong, you think it only ever happens to you. The receptionist who thinks that because you can't see, you're also deaf. Yes. The receptionist. And it was so much of a relief for me just to find out other people knew what I was talking about. Blind people everywhere now know what it is like to meet the person who thinks by shouting, "You will understand." But in the end, CCB means really a great deal to me. And I'm very proud to say that in a couple of weeks' time, I will be one of the delegates to the next conference in LA. And I would like to thank other members of the chapter for the opportunity of putting their trust in me and voting for me to go down there for them. But in the end, it's quite often the very small things that make big changes to your life. And for me, that thing was just a simple can of beans. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And if you or someone you love is experiencing vision loss, please get in touch with someone at the American Council of the Blind. There is lots of resources out there to help you, and you are not alone. Thank you.